A mafia boss was rejected on a Christmas blind date. Then a woman asked, "Can you be my husband?" What happened next? No one could have predicted it. The moment Beverly Ward walked up to Simone William's table in that snow-dusted Manhattan lounge, everything changed. She had watched him get humiliated by his date, a glass of expensive wine poured over his pride, the word thug echoing through the room. She knew who he was. Everyone did. The king of the underworld. The man whose name made boardrooms go silent and enemies disappear. But what she saw that night, it wasn't the monster the city feared. It was a man sitting alone at Christmas, his jaw tight, his hands still, his reputation bleeding out in front of a crowd of whispers and stares. And what Beverly did next? Not even she understood it fully. Before continuing the story, please consider giving this video a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more stories to you. Everyone in that lounge knew that Simone William did not get rejected. He did not sit in defeat. He crushed opposition. He controlled outcomes. People bent to his will or they broke. That was why the entire room froze when a woman in a burgundy dress, hands trembling, heels clicking on marble, walked straight toward his table and stopped. Beverly Ward looked down at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had rehearsed nothing. She had no plan. Her life was collapsing, debt collectors circling, her family inheritance slipping away, her grandfather's will ticking down to a New Year's deadline she couldn't meet. She was drowning, and this dangerous man in the expensive suit was the only lifeline in sight. She took a breath, felt every eye in the room burning into her back, and asked the question that would shatter both their worlds, "Can you be my husband?" Simone's dark eyes lifted. Slow, calculating, lethal. He didn't smile. He didn't flinch. He studied her the way a predator studies prey, except there was something else there too. Something raw. Something that looked almost like recognition. He leaned back in his chair, the corner of his mouth threatening a smirk. His voice came out low, smooth, and impossibly cold. "Sit down." Beverly's legs almost gave out, but she didn't run. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat. And in that moment, in that overpriced Christmas lounge with champagne glasses clinking and carols playing softly in the background, two people with nothing left to lose made a deal that would either save them both or destroy everything. The Velvet Rose lounge glittered like a jewel box someone had shaken too hard, crystal chandeliers trembling with each burst of laughter, champagne catching the light like liquid gold. And everywhere the forced cheer of Manhattan's elite pretending Christmas made them generous instead of just drunk. Outside, snow fell in that picture-perfect way it only seemed to in movies and money, dusting Fifth Avenue in white while inside, the temperature ran hot with gossip and expensive perfume. Simone William sat at table 7, a tumbler of scotch untouched in front of him, and tried to remember the last time he'd felt this profoundly stupid. The woman across from him, Margot something, a venture capitalist's daughter with cheekbones that could cut glass and an attitude to match, had spent the last 20 minutes dissecting everything from his cologne to his choice of restaurant. Not this restaurant, of course. She'd made it very clear the Velvet Rose was pedestrian for a first date, even if half the city's power players couldn't get a reservation. "I did some research on you," Margot said, swirling her wine with the kind of casual cruelty that came from never having consequences. "My father warned me, actually. Said you were, what was the word? Unsavory." Simone's joy tightened imperceptibly. Across the room, he could see two of his own men pretending not to watch. Carlo at the bar, nursing a beer he wouldn't finish. Vincent by the coat check, phone in hand, ready to move. They'd accompanied him because Simone William didn't go anywhere without insurance, but now their presence felt less like protection and more like an audience to his humiliation. "Your father isn't wrong," Simone said evenly. He'd built his reputation on honesty, even when the truth was soaked in blood. "I'm not a good man, Margot. But I was under the impression this dinner was about getting to know each other, not conducting a background check." She laughed, bright and brittle. "Oh, I know exactly who you are. Simone William. They call you the king of the underworld, don't they? How theatrical." She leaned forward, her smile sharpening. "My friends thought it would be funny if I actually showed up." A charity case, they said. Give the poor mobster a taste of real society. Something cold slithered down Simone's spine. Not fear, he'd forgotten how to feel that years ago, but something worse. Shame. The kind that came from realizing you'd been the punchline before you'd even arrived. I see, he said quietly. Do you? Margot picked up her wine glass, and for a moment Simone thought she might actually toast him, might salvage this disaster with a shred of dignity. Instead, she stood, looked him dead in the eye, and poured the entire glass of Chateau Margaux over his shoulder. The liquid hit his Tom Ford suit like a slap, red bleeding into black, and the lounge didn't just go quiet, it went silent. The kind of silence that preceded either violence or viral video, and in this room, probably both. You're nothing but a common thug in a nice suit, Margot announced, loud enough for the back tables to hear. Merry Christmas, Mr. William. Enjoy your meal alone. She walked away in a cloud of Chanel and satisfaction, heels clicking like a countdown. The room erupted in whispers, phones emerging from designer clutches, the story already being texted across the city. Did you hear? Simone William got rejected at the Velvet Rose. Someone poured wine on him. I heard she called him a thug. Simone sat perfectly still, wine dripping from his collar, his hands resting on the table because if he moved them, he wasn't sure what he'd break. Carlos started toward him, but Simone gave the slightest shake of his head. No scene. No reaction. He would finish his scotch, he would leave, and tomorrow he would remind the city exactly who controlled it. But tonight? Tonight he was just a man who'd been made a fool at Christmas. From her table in the corner, half hidden behind a marble column and a dying ficus, Beverly Ward watched the whole thing unfold and felt something crack open in her chest. Maybe it was empathy. Maybe it was desperation recognizing itself in someone else's eyes. Her phone buzzed against the table, the fourth call in an hour. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Marcus Chin. The debt collector with the dead eyes and the very specific timeline. You have until New Year's, Ms. Ward. After that, we stop being polite. Polite. As if the bruise on her ribs from his last polite visit wasn't still purple and tender. Beverly's grandfather had meant well with his will, marry by New Year's, inherit the Ward estate and trust fund, secure your future. He'd wanted her protected, provided for, partnered. He hadn't known that his death would coincide with her worst investment, her most catastrophic trust. Her ex-business partner had disappeared with everything, leaving only debt and Marcus Chen's business card. $200,000. Due in 8 days. She had $40 in her checking account and an inheritance she couldn't touch unless she had a husband she didn't have. She watched Simone William sit in his ruined suit, watched the most dangerous man in New York look almost human, and something insane occurred to her. Something desperate. Something that would either save her life or end it. He needed his reputation restored. She needed a husband by midnight, December 31st. Beverly stood before she could reconsider. Her burgundy dress felt too thin suddenly, her heels too loud. Every step toward table 7 felt like walking toward a cliff edge, and maybe it was. Maybe she was about to throw herself off, but drowning in debt or falling into the underworld, did it really matter which way she died? The room watched her cross the floor. She felt their stares like spotlights, heard the whispers multiply. Who is that? What is she doing? Is she insane? Probably, Beverly thought. Probably I am. She stopped at his table. Simone William looked up slowly, dark eyes unreadable, and Beverly Ward asked the question that would destroy every safe thing she'd ever known. Can you be my husband? Simone didn't move. Didn't blink. For 3 full seconds, the only sound Beverly could hear was the blood rushing in her ears and some tinny version of Silent Night bleeding through the lounge speakers. Around them, the whispers crescendoed into something almost musical, a symphony of shock conducted by champagne flutes and raised eyebrows. Sit down, Simone said finally, his voice low enough that she had to lean in to catch it. Not a request. A command wrapped in silk. Beverly's legs almost buckled with relief, but she forced herself to pull out the chair with steady hands, to lower herself into it like this was a normal conversation, like she propositioned dangerous men every day. The leather was still warm from Margot's brief occupancy, and somehow that felt obscene, like Beverly was stepping into another woman's disaster. Up close, Simone William was even more devastating than the society pages suggested. Sharp jaw, dark eyes that seemed to catalog everything about her in a single sweep, and a stillness that reminded Beverly of deep water, beautiful on the surface, lethal underneath. Wine stained his shoulder, a slash of red against black that should have made him look diminished. Instead, it made him look dangerous, like a predator someone had been stupid enough to wound. "You know who I am," he said. "Not a question. Everyone knows who you are." Beverly's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Simone William. You run half the city from the shadows. The other half just hasn't realized it yet." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe. Or warning. "And yet you walked over here. Most people cross the street when they see me coming. Most people aren't desperate enough to die." That got his attention. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with the kind of focus that probably preceded either business deals or bloodshed. "Explain." Beverly had rehearsed nothing, had no pitch prepared, but desperation had a way of making you eloquent. "I need a husband by New Year's Eve. You need your reputation back. I'm offering a trade." "A trade," Simone repeated, like he was tasting the word. "You walk up to a stranger, you're not a stranger. You're Simone William. And propose marriage because you think that helps me somehow?" He tilted his head slightly, and Beverly caught a glimpse of the man who'd built an empire on reading people's weaknesses. "What makes you think I need anything from you?" Beverly glanced deliberately at his wine-stained shoulder, at the phone still pointed in their direction, at the exit where Margot had disappeared in a cloud of satisfied cruelty. "Because 30 minutes ago, you were the king of the underworld. Now you're the man who got publicly humiliated at a Christmas party. That video is probably already on 3 gossip sites." She paused. "But if the dangerous Simone William shows up next week with a wife?" Suddenly it wasn't rejection. It was you playing the field before you settled down. Margot becomes the woman who didn't know you were already spoken for. Silence. Simone's fingers drummed once against the table, a barely perceptible tell. Beverly held her breath. "And what do you get out of this fairy tale?" he asked softly. "Besides the privilege of my company?" "My grandfather's inheritance. $2 million and the Ward estate. But only if I'm married by New Year's." The words tumbled out faster now, desperation leaking through her careful composure. "I made bad investments. Trusted the wrong person. Now I owe money to people who don't accept payment plans, and I have 8 days to become someone's wife or I lose everything. Including possibly my life." Simone went very still. "Who do you owe? Does it matter?" "It matters if you're bringing your problems into my world." "Name's Ms. Ward. Beverly Ward." She swallowed hard. "I owe a man named Marcus Chin $200,000. The change in Simone was immediate and terrible. His eyes went flat, his jaw tightened, and when he smiled it was the kind of smile that preceded funerals. "Marcus Chin. Small-time loan shark with delusions of grandeur. Works the edges of Chinatown, preys on people who can't go to banks." He leaned forward. "He works for my rival, Beverly. You don't just owe money. You owe Victor Kozlov's money." Beverly's stomach dropped. She'd heard that name before, whispered in the same breath as words like brutal and untouchable. "I didn't know, of course you didn't. Chin doesn't advertise his affiliations." Simone's smile widened fractionally. This just got significantly more interesting. "So you'll do it?" Beverly heard the desperation in her voice, hated it, couldn't stop it. "You'll marry me?" "I'll consider it. But first, let's establish terms." Simone gestured to one of his men, the one at the bar, who materialized beside the table with a pen. No paper, no contract, just Simone pulling a cloth napkin from the table setting and smoothing it flat. "You get your husband and your inheritance. I get a wife and my reputation restored. The marriage lasts through New Year's, long enough to satisfy your grandfather's will and make the society pages. After that, we reassess." "Reassess," Beverly repeated numbly. "If we don't kill each other first." Simone took the pen, began writing in sharp, precise script. No emotional entanglement. No interference in each other's business. You play the devoted wife in public. I provide protection and legitimacy. When this is over, we divorce quietly and go our separate ways." He slid the napkin across the table. In the dim light of the lounge, Beverly could make out the terms, ridiculously official despite being written on cloth: marriage of convenience. Duration: December 24th through reassessment January 1st. Parties agree to mutual benefit and discretion. "Sign it," Simone said, offering her the pen. "And understand that when you do, you become mine to protect. That means my enemies become yours. My world becomes yours. There's no going back from this, Beverly Ward." Her hand shook as she took the pen. Through the window, snow continued to fall, covering the city in white, making everything look clean and possible. Marcus Chen's last message flashed through her mind: 8 days. Beverly pressed pen to napkin and signed her name in burgundy ink that matched her dress. When she looked up, Simone was smiling, a real smile this time, sharp and promising and absolutely terrifying. "Congratulations, Ms. Ward," he said, folding the napkin and pocketing it. "You just married the devil." The New York City Marriage Bureau wasn't built for romance. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead like dying insects, casting everything in a sickly yellow that made even Simone's expensive suit look cheap. The linoleum floors were scuffed and stained, the walls a shade of beige that suggested someone had given up on life halfway through painting, and somewhere down the hall a baby screamed with the kind of conviction that spoke to Beverly's current state of mind. It was 11:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and she was about to marry a man whose last name she'd learned 3 hours ago. "Last appointment of the night," the clerk said, not looking up from her computer. She was somewhere between 50 and eternity, with reading glasses on a chain and the profound exhaustion of someone who'd watched too many people make terrible decisions. "You're lucky we're even open." Christmas Eve, most offices close early. "We're very grateful," Simone said smoothly, and even here, even in this fluorescent purgatory, his voice carried weight. The clerk glanced up, did a visible double-take when she actually saw him, and suddenly sat up straighter. "Right. Well, let's get you processed." She shuffled papers with newfound efficiency. "I'll need IDs, witnesses, and the marriage license fee. $200, cash or card." Beverly reached for her purse, but Simone's hand covered hers. The touch was brief, impersonal, but it sent electricity up her arm that had nothing to do with static and everything to do with the fact that she was insane. This was insane, and there was still time to run. "I have it," Simone said, producing a money clip that probably cost more than the clerk's monthly salary. He peeled off crisp hundreds like they were receipts. The witnesses materialized from the hallway: Carlo and Vincent, Simone's ever-present shadows. Carlo looked vaguely amused. Vincent looked like he was attending a funeral. Beverly couldn't decide which reaction was more appropriate. "Any objections to this union?" the clerk asked, running through the script with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. "Speak now or forever hold your peace." Vincent opened his mouth. Simone gave him a look that could have flash-frozen nitrogen. Vincent closed his mouth. "Wonderful," the clerk muttered. "Do you, Simone William, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Simone turned to Beverly, and for just a moment, she saw something flicker behind his eyes. Hesitation, maybe. Or calculation. The pause stretched long enough that Carlo shifted uncomfortably, long enough that Beverly felt her heart climb into her throat. "I do," Simone said finally. "And do you, Beverly Ward, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Beverly looked at the man beside her. Simone William, who controlled half of Manhattan's underground with a word and a glance. Who'd signed a marriage contract on a napkin. Who smelled like expensive cologne and danger, and who was currently offering her the only lifeline she had left. "I do," she whispered. "Rings." The question hung in the air like an accusation. Of course there were no rings. This wasn't a real wedding. This was a transaction, a business deal with a government seal, and rings implied something neither of them had promised: permanence, sentiment, actual feeling. But Simone reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small black box that definitely hadn't been there at the lounge. Beverly stared at it, then at him. "I made a call from the car," Simone said quietly, opening the box. Inside, nestled in black velvet, sat two rings. Hers was platinum, delicate but strong, with a single diamond that caught the fluorescent light and somehow made it beautiful. His was simpler, a matching band that looked almost humble against his dangerous hands. "You bought wedding rings in 3 hours on Christmas Eve," Beverly said stupidly. The corner of Simone's mouth lifted. "I made a call from the car," he repeated. "I have excellent resources." He took her left hand, and this time the touch wasn't brief or impersonal. His fingers were warm, steady, and when he slid the ring onto her finger, the world narrowed to just that point of contact, metal and skin, and the absolutely terrifying realization that this felt real. The ring fit perfectly. Of course it did. Simone William didn't do anything by half measures. "Your turn," the clerk said to Beverly, offering Simone's ring. Beverly's hands shook as she took it. The band was heavier than she expected, warm from being in the box, and when she reached for Simone's hand, he gave it without hesitation. His fingers were long, elegant, marked with scars she didn't have stories for yet. She slid the ring on slowly, feeling the moment it settled into place, and when she looked up, Simone was watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. Something passed between them. Not love. They'd known each other for 3 hours, and this was a business arrangement, a temporary fix to mutual problems. But something. Recognition, maybe. Or the first crack in the ice they'd both built around themselves. "By the power vested in me by the state of New York," the clerk droned, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." The words landed like a grenade in the small office. Beverly and Simone stared at each other. The contract hadn't mentioned kissing. The napkin had said nothing about physical contact beyond what was necessary for appearances, and there was no one here to perform for except 2 mobsters and a bored clerk. Simone stepped closer. "May I?" he asked, so quietly only she could hear. Beverly nodded, not trusting her voice. He cupped her face with one hand, thumb brushing her cheekbone, and kissed her. It was soft, chaste, the kind of kiss appropriate for a government office at midnight, but it burned. Beverly felt it down to her toes, felt every nerve ending wake up and pay attention, felt the ground shift beneath her feet. When Simone pulled back, his eyes were darker than before, his breathing slightly uneven. "Congratulations," the clerk said, already stamping their certificate. "You're legally married. Merry Christmas." Outside, snow had turned the city into something from a postcard. Simone's car idled at the curb, Vincent already holding the door open. Beverly stood on the steps of the marriage bureau, a wife now, wearing a stranger's ring, and wondered what she'd just done. Simone offered his arm. "Shall we, Mrs. William?" Mrs. William. The name sat strange on her ears, foreign and frightening and somehow right. Beverly took his arm, felt the solid warmth of him through expensive wool, and stepped into her new life as the Mafia king's wife. What do you think will happen when Beverly's family meets her new husband? Drop your predictions below and subscribe for the next part of the story. The Ward family estate sat in Connecticut like a mausoleum pretending to be a home, all stone and ivy and old money that had been slowly bleeding out for the past decade. Beverly felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach as Simone's Mercedes crunched up the gravel drive on Christmas evening. Through the tall windows, she could see movement, shadows of relatives circling like vultures who'd caught the scent of something dying. "You don't have to do this," Beverly said, not for the first time since they'd left Manhattan. "We could say you're sick. Food poisoning. Christmas flu." Simone adjusted his cufflinks, completely unbothered. He'd changed from the wine-stained suit into something even more devastating, charcoal gray, 3-piece, with a burgundy tie that matched her dress from last night. Intentional, Beverly realized. He'd coordinated with her. "We had a deal, Mrs. William. You play the devoted wife, I play the devoted husband. That includes meeting the family." "My family isn't like yours," Beverly warned. "They don't respect power. They only respect money, and even then, only if it's money they think they can take." Simone smiled, the dangerous one that made her pulse skip. "Then this should be educational for everyone involved." Vincent opened the car door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke and the particular smell of old houses where too many unhappy people had lived too long. Beverly stepped out, Simone's hand immediately finding the small of her back, possessive, protective, perfectly calibrated for anyone watching from the windows. The front door opened before they reached it. Aunt Caroline stood in the doorway, 70 years of passive aggression wrapped in Chanel and pearls, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Beverly, how unexpected. We heard you might be bringing someone, but of course we didn't believe it. You've always been so terribly independent." Aunt Caroline, Beverly said, forcing warmth into her voice. "This is my husband, Simone William." Simone, my Aunt Caroline Ward Prescott. She watched her aunt's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and barely concealed horror in under 3 seconds. To her credit, Caroline recovered quickly, extending a hand that trembled just slightly. "Mr. William." What a surprise. I wasn't aware Beverly was even dating. Simone took her hand, brought it to his lips in a gesture so old-world and devastating that Caroline actually blushed. When you meet the right person, Mrs. Prescott, timing becomes irrelevant. Your niece swept me off my feet. I couldn't wait another moment to make her mine. The words should have sounded ridiculous. Instead, they sounded like gospel truth delivered by a man who'd never been denied anything in his life. How romantic, Caroline managed, stepping aside. "Please come in. Everyone's in the dining room. They'll be so eager to meet your husband." The dining room was exactly as Beverly remembered, oppressively formal, with a table that could seat 20 and currently held 8 of her least favorite people. Uncle Richard at the head, red-faced and already drunk. Cousin Patricia and her hedge fund husband Marcus, both wearing expressions of smug superiority. Aunt Lydia, Caroline's sister, who'd been trying to contest grandfather's will since the day he died. And various others, all vultures, all waiting. The conversation died the moment Beverly walked in with Simone. "Everyone," Caroline announced, voice strained with false cheer, "Beverly has brought her new husband, Simone William." Uncle Richard stood, wobbling slightly. "Husband? Beverly, what the hell are you talking about? You can't just show up married to some." He stopped, finally getting a good look at Simone. His face went from red to white in an instant. "Jesus Christ. Not quite," Simone said pleasantly, "though I appreciate the comparison." He pulled out Beverly's chair, waited until she was seated, then took the seat beside her with the casual confidence of someone who owned the room. "Thank you for having us on Christmas." Beverly speaks so fondly of her family. The lie sat there, beautiful and obvious. Patricia recovered first, leaning forward with predatory interest. "Simone William. I've read about you in the financial pages. You have interests in, what is it? Import-export?" "Among other things." Simone accepted a glass of wine from the server, a young woman who looked absolutely terrified to be serving him. "I diversify. Restaurants, real estate, shipping. Whatever catches my interest." "How fascinating," Patricia purred. "And how exactly did you meet our Beverly? She's been so secretive lately." Beverly felt Simone's hand find hers under the table, fingers lacing together in a gesture of solidarity that shouldn't have steadied her but did. "At a charity function," he said smoothly. "She was the only person in the room not trying to impress me. I was intrigued." "And now you're married," Aunt Lydia interjected, her voice dripping with suspicion. "How convenient." Just in time for Beverly to claim her inheritance. The table went silent. There it was, the accusation they'd all been thinking, delivered with surgical precision. Simone's expression didn't change, but something in the room shifted. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. "I'm not sure I understand your implication, Mrs. Ward. Are you suggesting my wife married me for money?" "I'm suggesting," Lydia said, lifting her chin, "that the timing is suspicious. Beverly has 8 days to fulfill the terms of her grandfather's will, and suddenly she shows up with a husband? We have a right to contest. You have no rights." Simone's words cut through the room like a blade. He was still smiling, still holding Beverly's hand, but there was murder in his eyes. "Beverly's grandfather left very clear instructions. She needed to be married by New Year's. She is now married. To me. And I assure you, when my lawyers review the will, and they will, they'll find everything is perfectly in order. Your lawyers, Richard scoffed, Brandy giving him false courage. Listen here, young man, no, you listen. Simone set down his wine glass with careful precision. I understand family dynamics can be complicated. Inheritances bring out the worst in people. But let me be absolutely clear about something. He looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. Beverly is my wife. What's hers is mine, and what's mine, I protect. Viciously. If anyone in this room thinks they're going to contest her claim, intimidate her, or make her feel like she doesn't deserve what her grandfather left her, they'll answer to me. And, trust me, that dangerous smile widened. You don't want that conversation. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Uncle Richard had nothing to say. Caroline cleared her throat nervously. Perhaps we should serve dinner. The meal that followed was the quietest family gathering Beverly had ever attended. Simone played his role perfectly, attentive husband, asking about her childhood, touching her shoulder, refilling her wine. And every time one of her relatives opened their mouth to say something cutting, one look from him shut them down. By the time dessert arrived, Beverly almost believed it herself. That Simone William had married her for love. That this terrifying, powerful man actually cared. It was the most dangerous lie of all. Simone's estate wasn't what Beverly expected. She'd imagined something ostentatious, gold fixtures and marble statues, the kind of nouveau riche excess that screamed money without taste. Instead, the townhouse in the Upper East Side was elegant restraint personified. 5 stories of 19th-century architecture, with tall windows that overlooked a private garden and interior design that whispered old money even though Simone's fortune was decidedly new. Vincent carried her single suitcase, everything she grabbed in a panicked hour before leaving her apartment, up the front steps while Simone keyed in a security code that probably connected to enough surveillance to monitor a small country. "Welcome home, Mrs. William," he said, holding the door open. Home. The word felt foreign. Beverly stepped inside and was immediately struck by the warmth, not temperature, though a fire crackled in the front room, but something else. The house felt lived in. Books stacked on side tables, a cashmere throw draped over a leather sofa, the faint scent of coffee, and something spicy she couldn't identify. "I had your room prepared," Simone said, shrugging out of his coat. A woman appeared from nowhere, housekeeper, Beverly assumed, middle-aged and efficient, to take it. 3rd floor, overlooking the garden. Private bathroom, walk-in closet. "If you need anything adjusted, let Maria know." "My room," Beverly repeated. "We're not sharing a bed?" Simone's smile was knowing. "Our contract specified mutual benefit, not mutual sleeping arrangements." "You'll have your privacy, Beverly." "I'm not a monster." But he was, wasn't he? That was the whole point. The king of the underworld, the man who made people disappear with a phone call. Except here, in his home, taking off his cufflinks and rolling up his sleeves, he looked almost normal. Almost safe. "Mr. William," a voice called from deeper in the house. A man emerged, older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen too much. "The Kozlov situation needs your attention. They've made another move." Simone's expression shifted instantly, warmth replaced by ice. "Where?" "The warehouse in Red Hook. 3 of our shipments intercepted. They're sending a message. They're sending a declaration of war." Simone's voice went deadly quiet. He glanced at Beverly, something like regret flickering across his face. "I need to handle this. Maria will show you to your room. We'll have dinner later. I want to see," Beverly said suddenly. Both men stared at her. "See what?" Simone asked carefully. "Your work. The darkness everyone talks about." Beverly lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. "I married you, Simone. I'm in this now, whether I understand it or not. So show me." For a long moment, Simone studied her. Then he nodded slowly. "Vincent, have Beverly escorted to the study. Not inside, just close enough to understand what being my wife actually means." 20 minutes later, Beverly stood outside a closed study door on the 2nd floor, Vincent a silent presence beside her. Through the heavy wood, she could hear Simone's voice low, controlled, absolutely lethal. I don't care about messages, Dmitri. I care about results. Kozlov thinks he can move against me because he heard I got married, because he thinks I'm distracted. A pause. No. No more warnings. The next shipment he touches, we burn 3 of his. The next man of mine who disappears, 5 of his go into the river. And you tell Victor that if he wants a war, I'll give him one that makes the 90s look like a playground dispute. Beverly's blood ran cold. This was the man she'd married. Not the one who'd kissed her gently at the courthouse, or charmed her aunt, or created a home that smelled like coffee. This was Simone William, the king of the underworld, and he was promising to fill the East River with bodies. The door opened. Simone stood there, loosening his tie, and when he saw her face he went very still. You heard. Every word. And now you want to leave. It wasn't a question. I'll have Vincent take you back to your apartment. We'll figure out another way to handle your inheritance. I'm not leaving, Beverly interrupted. She was terrified, her hands shaking, but she'd come this far. I just needed to understand who I'm trusting with my life. Simone's laugh was bitter. You shouldn't trust me with anything, Beverly. I'm exactly what your aunt thinks I am, a thug with expensive taste and a body count. Maybe. Beverly stepped closer, saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried. But you're also the man who bought wedding rings in 3 hours. Who stood up for me at dinner? Who gave me my own room because you respect my privacy? She paused. Who do you trust with your life, Simone? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was raw. No one. Not anymore. When did that start? When I learned that everyone wants something. Money, power, protection. There's always an angle. His smile was sad. You, at least, were honest about it. You needed a husband, I needed my reputation. Clean transaction. Beverly looked at this man, this powerful, dangerous, profoundly lonely man, and realized they weren't so different. Both of them building walls, both of them too afraid to let anyone close enough to hurt them. The study, she said. Can I see it? Simone hesitated, then pushed the door wider. The room was beautiful floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk, leather chairs by a fireplace. But what caught Beverly's attention was the wall of photographs. Not crime scenes or enemies. Family. A young Simone with an older woman who had his eyes. The same woman, years later, in a hospital bed. And empty frames, dozens of them, waiting for pictures that hadn't been taken yet. My mother, Simone said quietly. She died when I was 19. Cancer. We couldn't afford treatment, couldn't get her into the trials. I built all of this. He gestured vaguely at the house, the empire, everything, so I'd never be that helpless again. Beverly's throat tightened. The empty frames? Optimism, maybe. Or stupidity. I kept thinking someday I'd have something worth photographing. A family. A life that wasn't just strategy and survival. He turned to her. I stopped believing that a long time ago. She didn't know what possessed her, maybe the way he looked standing there, powerful and broken. Maybe the realization that she'd married a man as desperate as she was, just better at hiding it. Beverly crossed the room and took his hand, the one wearing her ring. We have 8 days, she said. Maybe we use them to figure out what comes after survival. Simone looked down at their joined hands, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. Vulnerable. Human. Maybe, he said softly. Maybe we do. Is Simone falling for his contract wife, or is Beverly walking deeper into danger? Subscribe to find out what happens next. Beverly had ventured out alone exactly once since moving into Simone's townhouse, and that turned out to be once too many. She'd told herself it was harmless, a coffee run to the corner cafe, 15 minutes maximum, practically still within sight of the house. Simone was locked in back-to-back calls about the Kozlov situation, Vincent and Carlos strategizing in the study, and Beverly had felt suffocated by the weight of protection, by men with guns treating her like fragile cargo. She needed air. She needed to feel like herself again, even if herself was currently a Mafia wife wearing a platinum ring that cost more than her first car. The barista had just handed her a latte when the black sedan pulled up to the curb. Beverly knew immediately something was wrong. The car idled too deliberately, windows too dark, and when the back door opened, her stomach dropped through the floor because she recognized the man who emerged. Marcus Chin looked exactly as he had 3 weeks ago when he'd visited her apartment: sharp suit, dead eyes, and a smile that promised pain. 2 men flanked him, large and efficient, the kind who got paid to break things. "Mrs. William," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the sidewalk. "Or should I say Mrs. Ward? I'm having trouble keeping track of your current legal name." Beverly's hand tightened on her coffee cup. People on the street were starting to notice, starting to slow down, phones emerging from pockets. "I don't have anything to say to you, Marcus." "No? That's unfortunate, because I have quite a bit to say to you." He stepped closer, and Beverly fought every instinct screaming at her to run. "You see, I heard the most interesting rumor. That you got married. To Simone William, of all people. Very convenient timing, wouldn't you say? My marriage is none of your business. Your debt is very much my business. $200,000, Beverly. Did you think a wedding ring would make that disappear?" Marcus's smile widened. "Mr. Kozlov is very interested in your new husband. Very interested in anything that might give us leverage against the great Simone William." The threat was clear. Beverly wasn't just a debtor anymore. She was a tactical opportunity. "I'll have your money by New Year's," Beverly said, hating how her voice shook. "The inheritance comes through, you get paid, we're done." "Are we?" "Because Mr. Kozlov is thinking maybe you're worth more as a message than as a payment." Marcus nodded to his men. "Get her in the car." They moved fast. One grabbed her arm, coffee spilling across the sidewalk, and Beverly did the only thing she could think of: she screamed. Loud, piercing, the kind of sound that shattered the last pretense of civility on a Manhattan street corner. The second man clamped a hand over her mouth, lifting her off her feet, and Beverly bit down hard enough to taste blood. He swore, jerked back, and that half-second of chaos was all it took. A gunshot cracked through the air. Not hitting anyone, just fired into the sky, a warning that stopped everyone cold. Beverly twisted in her captor's grip to see Vincent standing 20 feet away, gun raised, Carlo flanking him with another weapon drawn. And behind them, fury incarnate in a charcoal suit, was Simone. "Let her go," Simone said quietly. His voice carried no heat, no anger, just absolute certainty that his words would be obeyed or people would die. Marcus's man released Beverly immediately. She stumbled, caught herself, and Simone was there in an instant, hand on her elbow, pulling her behind him with a possessiveness that was both terrifying and reassuring. "William," Marcus said, recovering his composure with visible effort. "This is just business. Your wife has outstanding debts." "My wife," Simone interrupted, his voice dropping to something sub-zero, "has no debts. Whatever she owed, she owes no longer. Send Victor the bill. I'll pay it personally. With interest. 200,000 is nothing. Pocket change. An insult." Simone took a step forward, and despite having 3 men with him, Marcus actually backed up. "But putting your hands on her? Threatening her on a public street? That, Marcus, is a declaration. So you go back to Victor and you tell him exactly what happened here. You tell him that Beverly William is under my protection now, and anyone who touches her answers to me. Mr. Kozlov won't. Victor will do exactly what I expect him to do. He'll posture and threaten and ultimately back down because he knows starting a war over $200,000 is bad business. But if he doesn't," Simone's smile was arctic, "if he's stupid enough to come after what's mine again, I'll dismantle his organization piece by piece and salt the fucking earth where it stood." The silence that followed was broken only by distant traffic and someone's abandoned car alarm. Marcus looked at Beverly, at Simone, calculating odds he clearly didn't like. "We'll be in touch," he finally said. "No," Simone corrected. "You won't. This conversation is over. Beverly's debt is paid as of this moment. I'm wiring the money before you get back to your car. And if I see you within 100 yards of my wife again, they'll find pieces of you in 3 different boroughs." Marcus and his men retreated to their sedan. The car pulled away, disappearing into Manhattan traffic, and only then did Simone turn to face Beverly. The cold fury was still there, but underneath it was something else. Fear. Real, genuine fear. Are you hurt? His hands moved over her arms, her shoulders, checking for damage with surprising gentleness. I'm fine. They didn't. I'm fine. You left the house alone. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact, but Beverly heard the weight behind it. I needed coffee. I didn't think. That's the problem, Beverly. You didn't think. Simone's jaw tightened. Marcus Chin works for Victor Kozlov. The same Victor who's been trying to undermine me for months. And you owed him $200,000. The way he said it, like he was finally putting pieces together, made Beverly's stomach sink. I was going to tell you when? After they took you? After Kozlov used you as leverage. Simone ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked rattled. I thought you just needed a husband for an inheritance. I didn't realize you were being hunted by my biggest enemy. I didn't know Chin worked for Kozlov. I just needed money, and he was there, and I was desperate enough to marry a stranger. Desperate enough to put yourself in my world without understanding what that meant. Simone stepped closer, and his voice softened into something almost tender. You didn't just want a husband, Beverly. You needed a shield. And you were too proud or too scared to tell me the whole truth. Beverly felt tears burning behind her eyes. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be smarter. He cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheek. You're my wife now. That means something to me, contract or not. It means I protect you, even from threats you don't tell me about. But I can't do that if you run off alone for coffee. I'm not used to needing protection. I know. That's what makes you dangerous to yourself. Simone's smile was sad. Come on. Let's go home. And Beverly? From now on, Vincent goes where you go. No arguments. She wanted to fight it, wanted to assert her independence, but the adrenaline was crashing and her hands were shaking, and the truth was undeniable. She'd married Simone William because she was drowning, and he was the only one strong enough to pull her to shore. Even if the shore was built on bodies and blood money. The townhouse was quiet in a way that felt almost sacred. Outside, snow had started falling again, blanketing the city in white and muffling the usual symphony of sirens and traffic. Inside, Beverly sat curled on the leather sofa in Simone's study, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a cup of tea going cold in her hands. It had been 3 hours since the incident with Marcus Chin. 3 hours since Simone had wired $200,000 to Victor Kozlov like it was nothing, had made calls that Beverly suspected would have consequences she couldn't fully imagine, had installed Vincent as her permanent shadow with instructions that bordered on paranoid. And then he'd disappeared into his study to handle what he called the aftermath, which apparently meant Beverly sitting alone with her thoughts and the slowly dawning realization that she'd almost been kidnapped on a Manhattan street corner. The door opened quietly. Simone stood in the doorway, tie gone, shirt sleeves rolled up, looking exhausted in a way that made him seem almost mortal. You're still awake. Couldn't sleep. Beverly set down her tea. I kept thinking about what almost happened. Don't. Simone crossed to the bar cart, poured 2 glasses of scotch without asking if she wanted one. What almost happened didn't happen. That's what matters. You paid my debt. I did. $200,000. Just like that. Simone handed her a glass, settled into the chair across from her. You're my wife, Beverly. What kind of husband would I be if I let you drown in debt I could eliminate with a phone call? A smart one? A rational one? Beverly took a sip, felt the burn. That money wasn't part of our deal. The contract said protection, not paying off my mistakes. The contract, Simone said slowly, is becoming increasingly irrelevant. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Beverly's heart kicked against her ribs. What does that mean? It means Simone stopped, looked down at his glass like it might have answers. It means when I saw Marcus Chen's man grab you today, I didn't think about contracts or deals or mutual benefit. I thought about killing him. Slowly. Painfully. Anyone who touched what was mine. I'm not yours, Beverly said, but her voice lacked conviction. Aren't you? Simone's eyes lifted, dark and intense. You're wearing my ring, living in my house, under my protection. You took my name, Beverly. At what point does the performance become reality? Beverly's breath caught. They'd been dancing around this for days. The way Simone's hand lingered on her back, the way she found herself looking for him when he left a room, the electricity that sparked every time they touched. The marriage was supposed to be temporary, transactional, but somewhere between the courthouse and the Christmas dinner and today's violence, something had shifted. "We have a contract," she said weakly. "We had a napkin." Simone stood, crossed to the window, stared out at the falling snow. "You want to know something? I destroyed it. 2 days ago. Burned it in the fireplace and told myself it was about protecting evidence, about making sure no one could prove our marriage was fraudulent. But that wasn't why I did it." Beverly set down her glass with shaking hands. "Why did you do it?" "Because I didn't want an expiration date on this anymore." He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression stole her breath. "Because when you held my hand in the study, when you asked who I trusted, when you didn't run after hearing me threaten to fill the river with bodies, I realized I haven't felt this human in years. Maybe ever. Simone, I know this wasn't the deal. You needed a husband for 8 days, not a man who's falling for you so hard he can barely think straight." His laugh was self-deprecating. "But I am falling. And I thought you should know before we cross New Year's, and you're legally entitled to walk away." Beverly stood on legs that felt unsteady. Her mind was racing, heart hammering, every logical part of her screaming that this was dangerous, that falling for Simone William was signing her own death warrant in 100 different ways. But the rest of her, the parts that had felt dead for years, the pieces she'd locked away after too many betrayals, those parts were coming alive. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of me? Of this. Of feeling something real for someone who lives in a world where people get kidnapped for leverage and debts are paid in blood." She moved closer to him, drawn like gravity. "I'm scared that if I let myself care about you, I'll lose you the way I've lost everyone else I've ever trusted." Simone reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with both hands. "I can't promise you safety, Beverly. My world is violence and strategy and calculated risk. But I can promise you this. I will burn down anyone who tries to take you from me. I will protect you with everything I have. And I will never, ever make you feel like you're just a transaction." Beverly's eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. "When did this stop being fake for you?" "The courthouse. When I put that ring on your finger and felt something click into place." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "When did it stop being fake for you?" "The family dinner. When you stood up for me like I was actually worth defending." They stood there, inches apart, snow falling outside and the fire crackling, and the whole world narrowed to just this moment. Beverly saw Simone's gaze drop to her lips, saw him hesitate, giving her the choice. She closed the distance. The kiss was nothing like the chaste press of lips at the courthouse. This was heat and hunger and desperation, weeks of tension finally breaking like a dam. Simone's hands slid into her hair, Beverly's fingers fisted in his shirt, and they kissed like they were drowning and each other was air. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Simone rested his forehead against hers. "We're supposed to be practical people making practical decisions. I know. This is neither practical nor safe. I know that too. And you're still here." Beverly smiled, feeling something like hope unfurl in her chest. "Where else would I be? You're my husband. For 4 more days. Then the inheritance comes through and you're free to leave." She pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. "What if I don't want to leave?" Simone's expression transformed, surprise giving way to something fierce and possessive and utterly devastating. "Then you stay. You stay and we figure out what this is. What we are. Your enemies will use me against you. They'll try. They'll fail. I didn't build an empire by being easy to manipulate." His smile was dangerous and beautiful. "Besides, you're not exactly a liability anymore, Mrs. William. You're becoming quite good at this world." Beverly laughed, the sound surprising her. "I threatened your cousin at dinner with a butter knife. And you made Marcus Chin bleed. You're a natural." She kissed him again, softer this time, and felt the last of her defenses crumble. This was insane. falling for a mafia boss, choosing danger over safety, believing that something born from desperation could become something real. But standing in his arms, wearing his ring, tasting his kiss, Beverly had never felt more certain of anything. For more days until New Year's, she murmured against his lips. Simone pulled her closer, and his voice was rough with promise. Then let's make them count. The Winter Charity Gala at the Plaza was the kind of event where Manhattan's elite came to see and be seen, where million-dollar donations were made with champagne smiles and designer gowns cost more than most people's yearly salary. Crystal chandeliers dripped light over a ballroom packed with old money, new money, and the kind of dangerous money that didn't advertise itself on tax returns. Beverly stood at Simone's side in a floor-length emerald gown he'd had delivered that morning, silk that clung to every curve, a neckline that was just shy of scandalous, and a slit that revealed enough leg to make his jaw tighten when she'd emerged from her room. His hand rested possessively on her lower back as they navigated the crowd, and she'd stopped pretending the touch was just for show. "Smile," Simone murmured near her ear. "Half this room wants to see if the rumors are true." "Which rumors?" "That you got married, or that your wife is a gold digger who trapped you for an inheritance." "Both. Though I believe the current favorite is that I married you to launder money through the Ward estate." His smile was dangerous and amused. "Creative, but inefficient. I have much better laundering operations." Beverly laughed despite herself, then sobered as she caught sight of a familiar figure across the room. Viktor Kozlov stood near the bar, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, surrounded by men in expensive suits who all had the same predatory stillness. He was watching them with the kind of focus that made Beverly's skin crawl. "He's here," she said quietly. Simone didn't need to ask who. "Of course he is. This is neutral ground, the one night a year we all pretend to be civilized." His hand tightened slightly on her waist. "Stay close to me. Vincent and Carlo are stationed at the exits. Nothing will happen here." But even as he said it, Beverly saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes tracked every movement in the room. Simone was a man who controlled situations, and this gala, with its witnesses and cameras and pretense of civility, was designed to strip that control away. Mr. and Mrs. William. A woman materialized beside them, champagne glass in hand and malice in her smile. Margot. The date who'd started this whole chain of events by pouring wine over Simone's pride. "How unexpected to see you here together. I heard the most interesting rumors about your whirlwind romance." Margot. Simone's voice was ice-wrapped in courtesy. "Still attending events where you're not wanted, I see." Her smile tightened. "Still picking up strays? Though I suppose Beverly is an upgrade from your usual associations." She turned to Beverly with false sweetness. "Tell me, how does it feel to marry a man for his money? Is the guilt worth the designer gowns?" Beverly felt Simone tense beside her, felt him preparing to eviscerate Margot with words that would leave scars, but she spoke first. "I didn't marry Simone for his money. I married him because he's the first person in years who didn't try to use me, diminish me, or make me feel small." She stepped closer to Margot, smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Unlike some people who pour wine on strangers because their trust fund taught them cruelty is a personality trait." Margot's face flushed red. "You little ladies." A new voice interrupted, smooth and accented. Viktor Kozlov had crossed the ballroom, champagne in hand, smile pleasant and eyes dead. "How wonderful to see such spirited conversation. Mrs. William, we haven't been properly introduced." Viktor Kozlov. Beverly's blood turned to ice. This close, she could see the calculation behind his courtesy, the threat wrapped in expensive cologne and a tuxedo that probably cost what her apartment used to rent for yearly. "Mr. Kozlov." She forced her voice steady. "I've heard so much about you." "Nothing good, I hope." Viktor's smile widened. "Your husband and I have such a complicated relationship. Competitors, you might say. Though recently our business has become quite personal." His gaze dropped meaningfully to her ring. $200,000 is a significant wedding gift. "Simone must care for you very much." "I take care of what's mine," Simone said, his voice low and lethal. "Is there a point to this conversation, Viktor, or are you just here to make threats at a charity event?" "Threats? How crude." Viktor sipped his champagne. I simply wanted to meet the woman who captured the great Simone Williams' heart. She must be extraordinary to make you burn $200,000 and challenge my organization over a debt she incurred. The debt is paid. We're done. Are we? Victor's eyes gleamed. See, that's where we disagree. I think we're just beginning. It happened fast. One moment Beverly was standing beside Simone, the next someone grabbed her arm from behind, yanking her backward with brutal efficiency. She tried to scream, but a hand clamped over her mouth, and she was being dragged toward a service entrance while the gala continued around them, music and laughter drowning out everything. Simone's roar of fury cut through the noise like a gunshot. Beverly saw him lunge forward, saw Victor's men block his path, and then she was being hauled through a door into a service corridor, her heels catching on marble as she fought against her captor. "Stop struggling," a voice hissed in Russian-accented English. "Mr. Kozlov just wants to talk." But Beverly had grown up with brothers, had taken self-defense classes, and had spent the last week living with a man who'd taught her that survival meant fighting dirty. She slammed her head backward, felt it connect with her captor's nose, heard the satisfying crunch of cartilage breaking. His grip loosened. Beverly twisted free, kicked off her heels, and ran. Behind her, chaos erupted. Gunshots, muffled but unmistakable. Shouting. The gala's music cutting off abruptly. Beverly sprinted down the service corridor, heart hammering, and nearly collided with Vincent as he emerged from a stairwell. "Mrs. William, they grabbed me." Kozlov's men. Vincent's expression went murderous. He spoke rapidly into his radio, then grabbed her arm. "Stay behind me." They rushed back toward the ballroom, and what Beverly saw when they emerged made her stomach drop. The gala had transformed into a war zone. Guests huddled against walls, security screaming into phones, and in the center of it all stood Simone with a gun pressed to Viktor Kozlov's temple. "You touched my wife," Simone said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "You grabbed her at my side, in public, and thought you'd get away with it because we're at a charity event?" He pressed the gun harder against Victor's head. "I am going to make an example of you that this city will remember for decades." "Simone," Beverly called out, rushing forward. "I'm okay. I'm here." His eyes found her across the room, and relief crashed over his features before hardening back into rage. "Are you hurt?" "No. Vincent found me. I'm fine. You hear that, Victor?" Simone's smile was terrifying. "She's fine. Which means you get to live. But your organization? Finished. Your operations? Shut down. Your men? They work for me now, or they don't work at all." He shoved Victor away with disgust. "Get out of my city. You have 24 hours before I start burning everything you've built." Victor stumbled, caught himself, and his face was a mask of fury and humiliation. "You're starting a war over a woman, I'm ending one." Simone holstered his gun, crossed to Beverly, and pulled her against him with a possessiveness that left no room for doubt. "She's not just a woman. She's my wife. And anyone who touches her answers to me." The ballroom was absolutely silent. Cameras had captured everything: Simone's threat, Victor's defeat, the undeniable truth that the king of the underworld had just chosen love over strategy. Beverly looked up at her husband, saw the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, and realized he'd just burned every bridge he had for her. "You just declared war on one of the most powerful families in the city," she whispered. Simone cupped her face, kissed her in front of 300 witnesses, and when he pulled back, his smile was devastating. "Worth it." Simone just risked his empire for Beverly. What happens next? Subscribe now to see how this ends. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of silence that only comes after snowfall, the city wrapped in white and hushed as if the world itself was holding its breath. Beverly woke to pale winter light filtering through the curtains of her room, except it wasn't her room anymore. Not really. She'd fallen asleep in Simone's bed 3 nights ago, after the gala, after the terror and the gunshots and his absolute refusal to let her out of his sight. She'd stayed there every night since. He wasn't beside her now. The sheets were cold, his side of the bed empty, and for a moment panic clawed at Beverly's throat. The aftermath of the gala had been swift and brutal. Viktor Kozlov had left the city, His operations dismantled with surgical precision, his men either absorbed into Simone's organization or run out of Manhattan entirely. But wars didn't end cleanly, and every day since had been filled with tense phone calls and men with guns stationed at every entrance. Beverly pulled on one of Simone's shirts, cashmere, ridiculously expensive, smelling like him, and padded barefoot down to the study. She found him standing by the window, coffee in hand, staring out at the snow-covered garden. He was still in sleep pants and a t-shirt, hair mussed, and the domesticity of it made her chest ache. "Merry Christmas," she said softly. Simone turned, and his smile was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way she'd rarely seen. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. William. You're up early. So are you." She crossed to him, accepted the coffee he offered from his own cup. "Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind." He pulled her against his side, and they stood together watching snow fall on the garden. "The lawyers confirmed it an hour ago. Your grandfather's inheritance cleared. As of midnight, you're officially a very wealthy woman." Beverly's breath caught. $2 million and the Ward estate. Everything she'd needed, everything she'd married a stranger to secure. The finish line she'd been racing toward for 8 desperate days. "It's done then," she said quietly. "It's done." Simone's arm tightened around her waist. "You fulfilled the terms of the will. The money is yours, the estate is yours. No one can contest it now." They stood in silence for a long moment. Outside, the city was waking up, early risers walking dogs, a few cars navigating snow-slicked streets, the distant sound of church bells marking Christmas morning. Inside, Beverly felt something breaking apart in her chest. "I should let you go," she said finally. "That was the deal. I get my inheritance, you get your reputation restored. 8 days, then we reassess." Simone went very still. "Is that what you want?" "No." The word came out choked. "But it's what's fair. You didn't sign up for a war with Viktor Kozlov. You didn't agree to have your life turned upside down by a desperate woman who brought you nothing but problems, Beverly." Simone turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. "Stop. You could have anyone. Someone from your world, someone who understands the darkness, someone who doesn't flinch when you talk about bodies in the river. I don't want anyone else." His voice was fierce. "I want you." The woman who walked up to my table and asked a question so audacious I couldn't help but say yes. The woman who bit Marcus Chen's man and ran in a ballroom gown. The woman who looked at my empty picture frames and didn't see a monster, just a lonely man who forgot what it felt like to hope. Tears spilled down Beverly's cheeks. "The contract, there is no contract." Simone pulled her closer, and his smile was soft, almost shy. "I told you I burned it. What I didn't tell you is when." "Want to know the truth?" Beverly nodded, not trusting her voice. "The courthouse. After the ceremony." He brushed away her tears with his thumbs. "We got back to the car, you fell asleep against the window, and I sat there looking at this napkin we'd signed like it meant something. And I realized it did mean something, just not what we'd intended. So I had Vincent stop at a trash can with one of those fire barrels. Burned it right there on Christmas Eve. But you said I lied. I said 2 days ago because I didn't want you to know how fast I'd fallen." His laugh was self-deprecating. The great Simone William, who built an empire on calculated decisions and emotional distance, destroyed a contract 10 minutes after signing it because some part of me already knew I wasn't letting you go. Beverly's heart was hammering so hard she could barely breathe. "You burned it before the family dinner. Before you paid my debt. Before everything. Before I had any logical reason to believe this was more than a transaction." "Yes." Simone rested his forehead against hers. "I'm not a good man, Beverly. I've done terrible things. I'll probably do more terrible things. My world is dangerous and dark, and most sane people run from it as fast as they can. I'm not running. I know. That's what terrifies me." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because now I have something to lose. You. And men like Victor will always use that against me. Let them try." Beverly pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "You taught me something these past 8 days. You taught me that protection isn't possession. That being vulnerable doesn't make you weak. That sometimes the scariest thing you can do is let someone close enough to hurt you and trust them not to. Beverly, I love you. The words tumbled out, raw and honest. I know it's insane. I know we barely know each other. But I love you, Simone William. Not your money or your power or your protection. You, the man who bought wedding rings in 3 hours. Who stood up to my horrible family. Who declared war on your biggest rival because someone dared to touch me. Simone's expression transformed, shock giving way to wonder giving way to something so intense it stole her breath. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, you terrifying, impossible, wonderful man. He kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of everything words couldn't capture. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Simone was smiling like she'd given him the world. I love you too, he said, and the words sounded like a confession, like a prayer, like a promise. I think I started loving you the moment you sat down at my table and refused to be afraid. And I'll keep loving you long after this Christmas ends, and the next one begins, and everyone after that. Beverly laughed through her tears. So we're doing this? Really doing this? We're really doing this. No contract, no expiration date. Just you and me figuring out what comes next. Your enemies will come after me. They'll fail. I'm very good at protecting what's mine. Your organization will think you've gone soft. Let them. I built it once. I can rebuild it 1,000 times. He pulled her close, and his voice was absolute. But I only get one you, Beverly. And I'm not letting you go. Not today, not ever. She kissed him again, tasting coffee and promise and the future they were choosing together. Outside, snow continued to fall on Christmas morning, covering the city in possibility. Inside, two people who'd started as strangers and become partners and then lovers stood wrapped in each other's arms, no longer bound by contracts or desperation. Just bound by choice. By love. By the terrifying, exhilarating decision to trust someone with your whole heart and believe they wouldn't break it. Merry Christmas, husband, Beverly whispered. Simone smiled against her lips. Merry Christmas, wife. The first of many. And standing there in the quiet of his study, wearing his shirt and his ring and his love-like armor, Beverly Ward, no, Beverly William, finally understood what it meant to come home. Thank you for listening until the very end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the story. There's another story like the one you just enjoyed on your left screen.